Welcome back to the Deep Dive. You gave us the sources on the recent Ryder Cup drama, and our mission today is to give you the fast-track knowledge on what turned out to be, well, far less about just the golf scores.
That's right. It was more about this massive near collapse, some really unexpected political back and forth, and honestly, some seriously disturbing crowd behavior.
Yeah, it sounds like a lot went down. When you mix that high-stakes competition with intense national rivalry, you definitely get drama.
You do. But the sources really paint this picture of contrasts. You had Team Europe winning, then this spontaneous kind of political troll.
Right, the chanting.
Exactly. Which then led to this private text message from Donald Trump that frankly showed a lot more grace than some of the stuff we saw in the stands.
Okay, let's get into that. We're diving deep into the aftermath of Team Europe's win. So how did we get from celebrating a championship straight to calling out Donald Trump on camera?
Well, it kicked off, as you might expect, in the locker room. They'd done the press conferences, the win was official, and the team, according to the sources, headed back to the dressing room. It was apparently a very emotional, spontaneous celebration.
And these days, those moments rarely stay private, do they?
Yeah.
Especially with smartphones everywhere. Which bit actually went viral?
It was Rory McIlroy who filmed it and shared it. The footage showed the whole squad chanting, "Are you watching Donald Trump?"
Okay.
But the context, which Captain Luke Donald gave later, seems key. He said the mood was just pure excitement, maybe a little bit of banter, not meant maliciously, apparently.
But still, calling out someone like Trump, who's known for responding, you'd expect some kind of reaction, right? Maybe a sharp post or just silence. What did the sources say actually happened?
This is where it gets interesting. The response was immediate and very personal. While the team was still in that celebratory moment, Rory McIlroy apparently got a private text message.
Directly from Trump.
Directly from him, yeah.
A private text first. Did the sources give any reason why he might have done that? Was it maybe, calculated?
Yeah.
To diffuse it or show some private respect?
There's definitely some thinking along those lines. That the private message was maybe a strategic way to look, statesmanlike while still acknowledging the chant.
Okay.
The sources do say that despite the public taunt, Trump appeared to take the barb in good spirits. And in that private text, he praised Team Europe's performance over the whole 3 days. Pretty courteous, all things considered.
But he didn't just leave it private, did he? There was a public response, too.
Correct. He did follow up publicly. On his Truth Social platform, he basically just acknowledged it straight up. Yes, I'm watching. Congratulations.
Simple.
Yeah, sort of balanced it out. Private praise to McIlroy, public nod to the banter. Felt like a specific kind of political handling.
Right. And just to set the scene fully, the sources remind us Trump was only actually there for the opening day's afternoon session.
That's right. Europe was already up 3-1 by the time he left.
So he wasn't even watching most of the action live when he sent that text. Makes the timing and the message itself kind of stand out.
Definitely. And that whole exchange, however sort of lighthearted it ended up being, happened right after a finish that, well, it should have been easy for Europe. Instead, it almost turned into this historic disaster.
Okay, let's shift to that, the actual competition.
Yeah.
Because the relief you mentioned in that dressing room chant, it makes more sense when you understand the nerve-shredding finish the sources talk about. This was nearly a huge collapse.
Oh, absolutely. Just think about Sunday morning. Team Europe walks out with a massive 12-5 lead, a 7-point cushion. In Ryder Cup terms, that's usually game over.
Insurmountable, almost. The U.S. needed a miracle, basically, to get the 14.5 points for an outright win.
Exactly. So what happened? How did it get so tense?
Yeah, where did all that momentum go?
Well, it didn't just shift, it completely reversed.
Yeah.
The Sunday singles finished 8.5 to 3.5 in favor of the U.S. Suddenly, almost every match seemed to be going America's way. The sources described Captain Donald's team as teetering on the brink for a lot of that afternoon. You can only imagine the quiet panic setting in on the European side.
That's an unbelievable amount of pressure. Psychologically, knowing you could be that team, the one that blew a 7-point lead, that must have weighed heavily.
Hugely. And this is where the scoring gets a little technical, but it's important for the tension. So you need 14.5 points to win the cup.
Right.
But since Europe were the defending champs, they only needed 14 points for a tie. And a tie means they retain the cup.
Okay. So 14 points keeps the trophy, 14.5 wins it outright. That makes those final moments even tighter. So who got them to that crucial 14-point mark first?
That was Shane Lowry. With the scores getting incredibly tight, Lowry found himself on the 18th hole needing at least a half point from his match.
Huge pressure.
Massive. And he delivered. Sank what the source called one of the most important putts of his career, right there on the 18th green. That tied his match, got you up to 14 points, and officially meant they defended the cup.
What a relief that must have been. But they still weren't quite home free for the outright win, right? They needed another half point for 15-13.
They did, and luckily for them, it came pretty quickly afterwards. Tyrrell Hatton secured that final half point needed.
Okay.
That officially made it 15-13. Finally putting an end to the possibility of that historic embarrassment. You can see why the celebration afterwards was maybe a little extra intense.
Definitely explains the energy in that dressing room video.
Yeah.
Okay, so we've covered the win, the relief, that unusual political exchange, but now we really need to talk about the darker side the sources mentioned.
Mm-hmm.
Because all this professional competition, even the Trump banter, it happened against a backdrop of some really unpleasant crowd behavior.
Yeah, it's a stark contrast, isn't it? You have these elite athletes, even a political figure, showing a degree of grace under pressure. And then, well, the sources describe a turbulent week. A lot of criticism directed at U.S. supporters for hostile conduct.
And Rory McIlroy was, again, sort of the main target.
Yeah, seems so. He apparently faced a lot of targeted heckling, jeers, just generally aggressive stuff all week.
It went beyond just cheering for your team then.
Oh, much further. The sources mentioned projectiles being thrown.
Projectiles? Like what?
Specifically, a cup of beer. And one report said it actually hit McIlroy's wife, Erica Stoll.
Wow. That's way over the line, hitting a player's family member. Did the sources say anything about security or how bad it got?
That detail is really disturbing, yeah. It just highlights how bad things got. And McIlroy spoke about it quite forcefully after the win. He mentioned the security presence was insane, which suggests they were really struggling to manage things.
Sounds like it.
He basically said golf should be held to a higher standard than what they experienced that week.
It makes you wonder, when it gets that hostile, that abusive, how do the players keep their cool? How do they focus?
McIlroy admitted it was tough. He specifically mentioned a lot of language that was unacceptable and abusive behavior. He even said he chirped back a few times himself because it was getting to him.
You can understand that impulse. Mm-hmm. But ultimately, he and Lowry tried to rise above it.
That seems to be the takeaway. He stressed they tried to handle everything that came our way with class and poise. Their response wasn't going to be getting dragged down into it.
Performance was the response.
Exactly. McIlroy summed it up pretty powerfully. We shut them up by our performance. A strong statement.
What an intense mix of stories from one event. So, for you, the listener, this deep dive really shows the Ryder Cup was, well, more than just golf. It was almost a social experiment.
Yeah.
You had this incredible competitive pressure, the near collapse, then these two completely different kinds of interactions happening off the course.
That contrast is really striking. The difference between, say, the private versus the public conduct. You see these top professionals, a political figure, engaging in this relatively controlled, even courteous banter.
Right, the text message.
Yeah, and then that's set against fans crossing lines into verbal abuse, even physical actions like throwing things.
It really throws a spotlight on how big sporting events can bring out the extremes. Amazing skill on one hand, really poor behavior on the other.
Absolutely. So maybe a final thought for you to consider, based on the sources you gave us. When you see this kind of boundary erosion at big events where fans feel okay yelling abuse or throwing things, even at families does the kind of sportsmanship shown by the athletes or even the calculated courtesy from a figure like Trump start to look like an exception rather than the rule. And maybe what does it say about the state of these big spectacle sports when needing insane security just becomes part of the background noise? What's the responsibility there?
Definitely some things to think about. Okay, that's all the time we have for this deep dive. We hope you feel fully up to speed on the Ryder Cup drama.